So I'm back again with more rock and roll themed videos. I just feel like a lot of people are craving nostalgia lately, especially my generation. I'm in my mid 50s. I feel like back in the day was better than it is now. And so I like to discuss these stories that I think need to be told, and then open the door for those of you out there who are watching who may want to chime in and add your own stories, because I think those were the best of times. And so I have two stories, but I kind of wanted to go in depth with Kathy Westmoreland. So when Elvis was touring, especially in Las Vegas, at the International Hotel, he had the Sweet Inspirations backing him up, as well as J.D. Sumner and the Stamps, and he had Kathy Westmoreland. Now, Kathy is the soprano of the backing section, the backing group, and Elvis called her the little girl with a beautiful high voice. Now, she got her start in where everybody gets their start, and that's in high school, in school, when you're a part of all the different activities that are available. And she was in the choir, she performed, she was doing jingles for commercials. She did backing vocals for a few albums, but she was actually at the Birdcage Theater in Buena Park, California. Now, let's go way back. Let's go way back. So Walt and Cordelia Knott started Knott's Berry Farm with just a berry stand, really, and then Cordelia started making her fried chicken, and it turned into a restaurant, and then he started buying these outbuildings and structures to create this sort of, well, to simulate like a town, a little western town, and then that just grew and grew and grew. Word got out about Cordelia's fried chicken, and they had this berry farm where they were making all kinds of berry delights like jams and jellies, preserves, pies, tarts, you name it. So syrup. So I am a native Californian. I grew up in Los Angeles, and we literally lived 14 miles from Knott's Berry Farm. And I basically grew up toggling back and forth between Disneyland and Knott's Berry Farm. We would go all the time. And then we would go, as I got older, we would go on weekends. And then as I got my own set of wheels and my driver's license, I would go with my friends. And then I grew up and got married, and I would take my daughter. So this whole thing has been a part of our family since my dad actually made the trek from Virginia to Los Angeles. And he landed in Vernon, California, and got a job with Sears Roebuck in the warehouse, and then moved from there after a couple of years to the catalog department, and then the rest is history. So that's for another video. But Knott's Berry Farm and Disneyland was really one of the main things that my dad wanted to do when he came from this poor town in Virginia. He knew California had more opportunities. So one of his dreams was to go to Disneyland and go to Knott's Berry Farm, and he has been going since 1962. He loves it, and he started taking me as soon as I was 18 months old, and I've been going ever since. So Kathy Westmoreland and Steve Martin, that's right, the original, the jerk, the comedian, the actor, Steve Martin, they got their start at the Birdcage Theater there at Knott's Berry Farm in Buena Park. Now, Steve Martin also worked at the Magic Shop on Main Street, USA at Disneyland Anaheim. Again, another video. But Kathy Westmoreland was one of these, it's a mellow, what do they call it? A melodrama. So it's got the complete music with the booing, the hissing of the villain when he comes out, and the yay and the hooray and the cheering for the hero when he comes out, and the ah for the heroine. So Kathy Westmoreland was one of the performers there and a singer, actress, and she actually went to school with Steve Martin. So the two of them, you know, made it big in their own lane, so to speak. He was a comedian and an actor, and she became a singer, and she was hired and found by Elvis in 1970 to join his backup group there for his shows. And I find it interesting because you know, when I was going to the Birdcage Theater, I wasn't aware of that when I was little. But I was aware of Elvis, but I wasn't aware that Kathy Westmoreland was actually started there at the Birdcage Theater. So when I finally found that out and put two and two together, I thought that was great. I never saw her perform because, gosh, I was not even one when she left to go on tour with Elvis. So I do have, is it 2 stories? No, well, 2.5 maybe. Elvis stories for you. And one was in 1970, between 71 and 72. Dad can't remember. He thinks it's 71 because it was in August. And my mother's birthday is in August, and their anniversary is in August. So that's kind of like, you know, more bang for your buck when you can go to Vegas in August and celebrate, right? So he believes it was in 1971 where they saw Elvis at, you know, the International Hotel. So this is the story he tells me. He says, and you know, I asked him, who were you with? What were you wearing? You know, what was the weather? I was trying, he says, I can't really remember the specifics, the details, but I know it was hot because it was August. And they had gone to dinner before the show. This wasn't a dinner and a show. This was dinner with a friend. And my dad used to work with a guy named Dell and his wife, Kathleen. So it was these two couples, Dell and Kathleen, with my parents. And they went to Vegas. And so they go to dinner, and then after that they have tickets in the evening to go see Elvis. And you know, I said, what were you wearing? He says, I don't know, it was just 70s clothes. And I said, okay. And of course they don't have any pictures or anything, so but he remembers, okay, so they're there, and you know, Elvis is performing, and then you know, after, typically he would do, you know, the opening song, and then he would do a couple of faster, older songs, like, you know, like after CC Rider, he may do a more serious song, and then he'd do like 2 songs like Hound Dog, Don't Be Cruel, and then he would do a more recent song, and then kind of switch off back and forth so that he could please everybody and play the oldies that made him famous, but also play the newer ones that he was releasing at the time. So it would, and then he had the moment where he would take a break and introduce the group, right? So this was before introducing the group and just before starting another segment of music. And my dad says that it was quiet for like a split second, and my mother shouts out, "I love you, Elvis," at the top of her lungs. And he just stopped, started laughing, and turned around and looked out, and then just started laughing again, and then started up with the song. And he says, "I couldn't believe that she did it, but she did. She screamed at the top of her lungs." And I said, "What did everybody do?" He says, "They just got a laugh out of it, you know, because they just got a laugh out of it." And yeah, so my mom saw her opportunity and she went for it. I thought that was funny. And then another time, this was November 14th, 1972 in Long Beach. My parents saw Elvis play, and it was at 8:30 in the evening, and he was wearing the blue suit. So he remembers that. And those were, well, that was one in Vegas and one in Long Beach, which is, you know, part of Los Angeles Metroplex. But they got to see him there. And those were two of those stories that he told me. And then, you know, I had asked him, I said, "Who else did you see other than, you know, I know you would see Elvis, but who else? Who were the other artists?" And he said, "Well, we saw Tom Jones 3 times. And of course, Tom Jones had a TV show, and I'm sure you've seen some of his TV performances." And then he said, "We saw Paul Revere and the Raiders with the association. And there was one that he saw in Lake Tahoe. And he saw Tom Jones at Caesar's Palace." He said, "I think it was called Cleopatra's Barge or something like that." And he saw Tom Jones there, of course, on a Friday, and then saw Elvis on a Saturday for an amazing weekend. And my mother decided to take her chance and tell Elvis that she loved him. So back to Kathy Westmoreland. I think it's interesting that, you know, you can always hear her. And, you know, growing up, I always sang along with the records, and I'm a soprano, so I was always singing her part. And I remember, so I didn't really get into the Beatles music until I would say around 83, 84, when Paul McCartney released that movie, Give My Regards to Broad Street. And I actually did see him at the movie premiere. But I remember hearing the Beatles singing something, and I said, "Wow, they're playing an Elvis song." And my dad said, no, it's the other way around. He covered George Harrison's Something. And then of course in that, when George is playing, he's playing the guitar, but when Elvis arranged it, he had those high voice to kind of simulate the crying of a guitar. He had Kathy Westmoreland sing those really high pitches, and she's kind of going down like a guitar bend as she's singing in the background. So yeah, I do remember seeing her on the programs, on live performances, and I always remember hearing her voice because that was the one that I could always sing along to. And of course, he was always introducing his band. So I find it interesting that Kathy Westmoreland once was a Knott's Berry Farm Birdcage Theater performer and a birdie that finally flew free to go perform with Elvis Presley. That's an amazing story.
Something in the way she moves attracts me like